The sound of gunfire split the dawn like thunder on a clear day, echoing through the dusty streets of Calistoga, California in 1877. Prudence Galloway dropped to her knees behind a water trough, her heart hammering against her ribs as bullets splintered the wooden boards above her head. This wasn't how she had planned to start her new life in the West, but then again, nothing about her journey had gone according to plan. "Stay down, miss," a deep voice commanded from somewhere to her right. Through the haze of gunpowder and morning mist, she glimpsed a tall figure crouched behind a barrel, returning fire with deadly precision. 3 men had ambushed the stagecoach carrying Prudence into town, killing the driver before she'd even had a chance to see the welcome sign. The passengers had scattered, but Prudence had been cornered, her valise containing everything she owned abandoned in the dirt street. Another shot rang out, followed by a cry of pain. One of the bandits tumbled from his horse. "That'll teach you to trouble decent folk," the stranger called out. 2 more shots and the remaining bandits retreated, the sound of hooves fading into the distance. The stranger stood, holstering his pistol with practiced ease. He turned toward Prudence, and she got her first clear look at her savior. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. A well-worn Stetson sat atop thick dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His face was all sharp angles and determination, softened only by the gentle concern in his expression as he approached. "Are you hurt, madam?" He extended a hand to help her up. Prudence brushed the dust from her travel-worn skirts. "No, thanks to you, Mr. Zachary Zimmerman. Most folks call me Zach." He tipped his hat. "And you'd be the new schoolteacher, I reckon. Town's been waiting on you." Prudence nodded, trying to regain her composure. "Prudence Galloway. I was supposed to arrive with considerably less drama." A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the gunfire. The sheriff pushed through, his star glinting in the morning light. "Zach," the lawman acknowledged with a nod. "Another rescue. Just happened to be in the right place," Zach said modestly. "These were Thorpe's boys, getting bolder." The sheriff spat in the dust. "3rd raid this month. I'll send a telegram to the marshal." He turned to Prudence. "Welcome to Calistoga, Miss Galloway." Not usually this exciting before breakfast. Prudence managed a weak smile. "I should hope not." Zach picked up her valise, dusting it off with his bandana. "The boarding house is just down the street. Mrs. Wilson's expecting you. I'd be happy to escort you there." "That's very kind, Mr. Zimmerman." "Just Zach, please. Mr. Zimmerman makes me look over my shoulder for my pa." His smile transformed his face, revealing a dimple in his left cheek. As they walked, Prudence became acutely aware of the stares they attracted. Women whispered behind gloved hands, and men paused in their morning routines to watch them pass. "Is something wrong?" she asked quietly. Zach shook his head. "Folks are just curious about the new schoolteacher. We haven't had one since old Mr. Harper took ill last winter." But Prudence sensed there was more to the curious glances than simple interest in a new arrival. By the time they reached the boarding house, she was grateful for the respite from prying eyes. Mrs. Wilson, a plump woman with a perpetual smile, welcomed her warmly. "My stars, child." I heard the commotion. Thank heavens Zach was there. He's our guardian angel, that one. Zach's cheeks reddened slightly. "Just doing what anyone would, Mrs. Wilson." "Nonsense." The older woman turned to Prudence. "This young man is too modest by half. Best horseman and shot in the county and the kindest heart to boot. His ranch is the most prosperous for 50 miles in any direction." "Mrs. Wilson." Zach protested. "Oh, hush. Let me brag on you a bit." She patted his arm affectionately. "Now, Miss Galloway, let me show you to your room. You must be exhausted after your journey and that dreadful business this morning." As Mrs. Wilson led her upstairs, Prudence glanced back to see Zach watching her, his expression unreadable. He tipped his hat once more before turning to leave. "Such a fine man, Mrs. Wilson remarked as they reached the landing. "His poor mother would be proud of what he's built. Came here with nothing 10 years ago, just a boy of 19 with dreams bigger than the California sky. Now look at him." "He seems very capable," Prudence offered neutrally. Mrs. Wilson gave her a knowing look. "More than capable, dear. But mind you, there's history in this town you ought to know about before you form too many attachments." "I've come to teach, Mrs. Wilson, not to form attachments." The older woman merely smiled. "We'll see about that. Now, here's your room. Get some rest. School starts on Monday, and those children have been running wild without a proper teacher." Alone in her modest but comfortable room, Prudence unpacked her few belongings, her mind returning to the striking cowboy who had saved her life. There was something in his eyes, a depth of feeling, perhaps, or a hidden sorrow that intrigued her despite her determination to focus solely on her new position. Prudence had come to Calistoga for a fresh start, to escape the whispers and judgment that had followed her in Boston after her father's disgrace and suicide. The last thing she needed was to draw attention or create new gossip. She would be the very model of propriety, the perfect schoolteacher. Zachary Zimmerman, with his gunslinging heroics and penetrating blue eyes, was exactly the kind of complication she must avoid. Yet as she lay down to rest, his face was the last image in her mind before sleep claimed her. The town of Calistoga bustled with activity as Prudence made her way to the schoolhouse on Monday morning. The single-room building had been swept and prepared for her arrival, with rows of benches facing a small desk and blackboard. Through the windows, she could see children of various ages already gathering in the yard, their curious faces peering in at the new teacher. Taking a deep breath, Prudence smoothed her plain gray dress and adjusted her spectacles. First impressions were crucial. She needed these children and their parents to respect her from the outset. "Miss Galloway." She turned at the sound of her name, surprised to find Zach standing in the doorway, hat in hand. He looked different today, cleaner, more polished. His usually windswept hair was neatly combed, and he wore a crisp white shirt under his vest. "Mr. Zimmerman, I didn't expect to see you here." He stepped into the room, his spurs jangling softly against the wooden floor. "I serve on the school board. Thought I should welcome you properly and see if you need anything before the children arrive." "That's very considerate. Everything seems to be in order." She gestured to the room. "Though I admit I'm nervous. There appear to be quite a range of ages. 27 students altogether, ages 6 to 16. Some only come when farm work is slow." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "I wanted to warn you about one of your students. Billy Thompson, 12 years old, sandy hair. His father's the town drunk, and the boy sometimes comes to school with bruises. We've tried to intervene, but Thompson threatens to pull Billy out of school entirely if we push too hard." Prudence's heart clenched. "I understand. I'll keep an eye on him." Zach nodded, relief evident in his face. "I knew you would. There's something else." He hesitated, shifting his weight. "Some of the town's more traditional families might be hesitant about you. Because I'm from the East, partly that, but also because of who recommended you for the position." Prudence frowned. "The school board in San Francisco. Me." Zach's blue eyes held hers steadily. "I have connections in San Francisco. When I heard about a qualified teacher looking for a position, I pushed for you to come here. But you didn't even know me. I knew your credentials. Harvard education, excellent references. Calistoga deserves the best." His expression softened. "And I've found that people running from something often work the hardest to prove themselves." She stiffened. "What makes you think I'm running from something?" Takes one to know one, Miss Galloway." A sad smile played at his lips. "We all have our ghosts. This town gave me a second chance. I hope it will do the same for you." Before she could respond, the school bell rang, signaling the start of the day. Children began filing in, their chatter filling the room. Zach stepped back. "Good luck, Miss Galloway. I look forward to hearing how your first day goes." With a tip of his hat, he was gone, leaving Prudence to wonder about the enigmatic cowboy who seemed to see right through her carefully constructed facade. The first week of school passed in a blur of names, faces, and establishing routines. Prudence found herself genuinely enjoying the eager minds of her students, even as she navigated the challenges of teaching such a diverse group. True to Zach's warning, she noticed young Billy Thompson's reluctance to remove his jacket even in the warm classroom, and the flinch that crossed his face when she raised her hand too quickly to write on the blackboard. On Friday afternoon, after dismissing her class, Prudence remained at her desk, reviewing her lesson plans for the following week. A shadow fell across her papers, and she looked up to find Josephine Blackwell, the banker's wife, standing in the doorway with her daughter. "Miss Galloway, I hope I'm not interrupting," Mrs. Blackwell said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Not at all. How can I help you?" "I wanted to discuss Emily's progress." She gestured to the girl beside her, a pretty child of about 10 with perfectly braided blonde hair. "And to invite you to our home for dinner tomorrow evening. We're having a small gathering of Calistoga's more established families. As our new school teacher, you should meet everyone properly." Prudence recognized the invitation for what it was, an evaluation. "How kind. I'd be delighted." "Excellent. 7 o'clock. Mrs. Blackwell paused, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "A word of advice, my dear. You might want to be cautious about your associations in town. First impressions are so important, and some connections could undermine your authority." "I'm not sure I understand," Prudence said, though she suspected she did. "I noticed Mr. Zimmerman escorted you to the boarding house your first day, and he's been seen stopping by the school rather frequently." Mrs. Blackwell's expression was sympathetic, but her eyes were cold. "While we appreciate his financial contributions to the school, his background makes him an unsuitable acquaintance for our schoolteacher." Prudence felt her cheeks flush with indignation. "Mr. Zimmerman saved my life during the stagecoach robbery. I hardly think gratitude constitutes an improper association." Of course. I merely thought you should know that Mr. Zimmerman's mother was a woman of questionable virtue. And despite his current prosperity, there are those who remember when he arrived in town with nothing but the clothes on his back and his mother's profession as his only legacy." Prudence stood, gathering her papers with deliberate calm. "Thank you for the invitation, Mrs. Blackwell. I look forward to meeting everyone tomorrow evening. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have preparations to make." After the Blackwells departed, Prudence sat back down, her hands trembling slightly with anger. How dare that woman spread such vicious gossip about the man who had shown her nothing but kindness? And yet, she couldn't help but wonder if there was truth behind the banker's wife's words. What was Zach's story? And why did it matter so much to her? The Blackwell home was the grandest in Calistoga, a Victorian mansion on the edge of town that spoke of wealth and ambition. Prudence arrived precisely at 7, wearing her best dress, a deep blue silk that she'd saved for special occasions. It was slightly outdated by Eastern standards, but she hoped it would pass muster in this frontier town. She was greeted by a maid and shown to a parlor where a dozen of Calistoga's elite were already gathered. Conversation faltered briefly as she entered, and she felt the weight of their assessment. "Miss Galloway, welcome." Richard Blackwell, the banker, approached with an expansive smile. Unlike his wife, his friendliness seemed genuine. "Let me introduce you around." For the next half hour, Prudence shook hands and exchanged pleasantries with merchants, ranchers, and their wives. She noticed that while the men were polite, many of the women regarded her with barely concealed suspicion. Was it simply that she was an outsider, or had Mrs. Blackwell already been spreading her poisonous words? Dinner was an elaborate affair with fine china and multiple courses. Prudence found herself seated beside Dr. Harrison, a kindly older gentleman who seemed genuinely interested in her teaching methods. "The children speak highly of you already," he said, cutting into his roast beef. "Even young Billy Thompson, who hasn't had a good word to say about school in years." "He's a bright boy," Prudence replied. "I've been giving him extra attention with his rating. He struggles, but he's determined." "That's more than his father deserves," muttered Mrs. Blackwell from across the table. "That man is a menace." "Speaking of menaces," interjected Thomas Fuller, the owner of the general store, "has anyone heard about Thorpe's latest threat? Apparently, he's planning something big." "My cousin in Sacramento says the marshal's office is concerned." The conversation turned to the outlaw gang that had attacked the stagecoach, and Prudence listened with interest as the town's problems unfolded before her. "If Zimmerman hadn't run them off that day, who knows what might have happened to our new teacher," Dr. Harrison remarked. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. "Yes, well, even a man of his background can occasionally do something useful," Mrs. Blackwell said dismissively. "What exactly is Mr. Zimmerman's background?" Prudence asked, unable to contain her curiosity any longer. "I understand he's quite successful now." The silence deepened, broken finally by Richard Blackwell clearing his throat. "Zach's done well for himself. Started as a ranch hand, saved every penny, bought his own place when old man Jenkins wanted to retire, built it into something impressive. And before that," Prudence pressed. Mrs. Blackwell's lips thinned. "His mother was a prostitute in San Francisco. Brought him here when he was 16, already dying of consumption. She passed within a year, leaving him with nothing but her shame. He took odd jobs, slept in the livery stable until he could afford a room. Some say he turned to robbery for a while, though nothing was ever proven." "Josephine," her husband warned. "She asked," Mrs. Blackwell replied defensively. "Besides, everyone knows the stories. How he suddenly had money to buy Jenkins Ranch just months after the Butterfield stage was robbed outside Sacramento. Very convenient timing." "That's unfair, and you know it," Dr. Harrison said firmly. "Zach worked himself to the bone for years. I treated his hands when they were raw and bleeding from ranch work. Whatever his mother's profession, the man has earned everything he has through honest sweat. Then why doesn't he marry?" Mrs. Fuller spoke up. "A man his age, with his wealth, should have a family by now. I've introduced him to my niece 3 times and he barely acknowledges her. It's not natural." "Perhaps," Prudence suggested coolly, "he's waiting for someone who values him for more than his property." An awkward silence descended upon the table. Richard Blackwell chuckled nervously. "More wine. Anyone." As the dinner progressed, Prudence found herself increasingly uncomfortable with the narrow-mindedness of Calistoga's elite. When the ladies withdrew to the parlor after dinner, leaving the men to their brandy and cigars, she excused herself early, claiming a headache. "Such a shame you're unwell," Mrs. Blackwell said with false sympathy as she walked Prudence to the door. "I do hope our conversation about Mr. Zimmerman didn't upset you. I merely thought you should know the kind of man he is before you. Well, before you develop any inappropriate attachments." Prudence straightened her spine. "I appreciate your concern, Mrs. Blackwell, but I form my own opinions about people based on their actions, not their parentage or past circumstances. Good evening. The night air was cool as she walked back toward the boarding house, her mind churning with all she had learned. If what they said about Zach's mother was true, he had overcome tremendous obstacles to build his current life. Rather than diminishing him in her eyes, the knowledge only increased her admiration. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the approaching rider until he was almost upon her. Her heart leaped into her throat before she recognized the familiar silhouette against the moonlight. "Miss Galloway, what are you doing out alone at this hour?" Zach dismounted in one fluid motion, concern evident in his voice. "I was at the Blackwells' dinner party. I left early." She hesitated. "They were discussing you." His expression hardened. "I can imagine what they had to say." "Is it true, about your mother?" Zach was silent for a long moment, his hand absently stroking his horse's neck. "Yes," he finally said. "My mother did what she had to in order to feed us. When she got sick, she brought me here, hoping the clean air would help her recover and give me a fresh start. She died anyway, but she made me promise I would build something honest, something good." His blue eyes met hers. "I've kept that promise." "I believe you," Prudence said simply. "Do you?" "Most people in this town still see me as the son of a whore. They take my money for their causes, they respect my business sense, but they'll never let me forget where I came from. Then they're fools." The words escaped before she could consider their propriety. Zach's expression softened. "You're different than I expected, Miss Galloway." "Prudence," she corrected. "If we're sharing confidences, you might as well use my given name." "Prudence," he repeated, the name sounding like a caress in his deep voice. "Would you allow me to escort you the rest of the way home?" She nodded, and they walked together in companionable silence, his horse following behind. When they reached the boarding house, Zach hesitated. "There's a harvest festival next Saturday," he said. "Would you consider attending with me?" Prudence thought of Mrs. Blackwell's disapproving face, of the whispers that would follow them. "They'll talk if they see us together." "Let them talk. I stopped caring about their opinions long ago. It's different for me, Zach. I'm the school teacher. The parents need to trust me with their children. And you think being seen with me will damage that trust?" His voice was carefully neutral, but she could sense the hurt beneath. "I don't know. I came here to start fresh, to leave my own troubled past behind. I can't afford scandal, not even by association." Zach stepped back, his expression closing off. "I understand. Good night, Miss Galloway." He mounted his horse and rode away before she could explain further, leaving her standing alone with the weight of unspoken words and the sinking feeling that she had just made a terrible mistake. The following weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Prudence threw herself into her teaching, staying late to help struggling students and developing new methods to engage the older children who were more interested in ranch work than reading. She saw Zach occasionally in town, but he maintained a polite distance, tipping his hat when their paths crossed, but never lingering to talk as he once had. She told herself it was for the best. Her position in the community was growing stronger each day, and several parents had commented on the improvements they'd seen in their children's learning. Even Mrs. Blackwell had grudgingly praised her methods at the last school board meeting, but something was missing. The excitement she'd felt in those early days had dimmed, replaced by a dull ache whenever she caught a glimpse of a tall figure on horseback, or heard Zach's name mentioned in conversation. On a crisp October afternoon, Prudence was walking home from school when she noticed a commotion at the sheriff's office. A crowd had gathered, and tension hung in the air like a thundercloud. "What's happening?" she asked Mrs. Wilson, who was watching from the boarding house porch. "Thorpe's gang robbed the bank in St. Helena yesterday, shot the sheriff, they're dead. Our sheriff's organizing a posse to go after them." Prudence's blood ran cold. Is that wise? They sound dangerous. They are animals, Mrs. Wilson spat, but our boys will get them. As they watched, a group of men emerged from the sheriff's office, armed and grim-faced. Among them was Zach, his expression resolute as he checked the rifle strapped to his saddle. Without thinking, Prudence hurried across the street, pushing through the crowd until she reached him. Zach. He turned, surprise evident in his blue eyes. Prudence, what are you doing here? I heard about the posse. You're going after Thorpe, someone has to. He killed a good man yesterday. But it's dangerous, they outnumber you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Worried about me? Of course I am. The admission came easily, too easily. His expression softened. I'll be careful. We all will. The sheriff called for the men to mount up, breaking the moment between them. Zach swung into his saddle, looking down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. When I get back, he said quietly, we need to talk, properly. She could only nod, her throat tight with fear and unspoken emotions. As the posse rode out of town, Mrs. Blackwell appeared at Prudence's side. That man is going to break your heart, you know. If the outlaws don't kill him, his own recklessness will. He's always been the first to rush into danger, as if he's trying to prove something. Or as if he believes protecting others is the right thing to do, Prudence countered. Be careful, Miss Galloway. Your reputation in this town is still fragile. Prudence turned to face the banker's wife directly. Mrs. Blackwell, I appreciate your concern, but I judge a person by their character, not by circumstances of birth or malicious gossip. Zach Zimmerman has shown me nothing but kindness and integrity, and I will not pretend otherwise to satisfy this town's prejudices. Mrs. Blackwell's eyes widened in shock. Well, if you'll excuse me, I have papers to grade. Prudence walked away, her heart pounding but her head held high. For the first time since arriving in Calistoga, she felt truly herself, not the careful, proper schoolteacher she'd been pretending to be, but the woman who believed in justice and fairness above social conventions. 3 days passed with no word from the posse. The town grew tense with waiting, and Prudence found it increasingly difficult to focus on her teaching duties. Every hoofbeat on the street made her rush to the window, hoping to see familiar riders returning. On the 4th day, as she was dismissing her students, the church bell began to ring, not the measured toll for services, but a frantic, joyful peal that signaled news. Her students rushed outside, and Prudence followed, her heart in her throat. The posse was returning, riding slowly down the main street. Townsfolk poured from shops and homes to greet them, cheering at the sight of several bound men being led behind the sheriff's horse. Thorpe's gang had been captured. Prudence scanned the riders anxiously, finally spotting Zach near the rear of the group. Relief flooded through her until she noticed he was slumped in his saddle, his shirt darkened with what could only be blood. She pushed through the crowd, reaching him just as he dismounted, wincing with the effort. You're hurt. It's nothing. Bullet grazed my side. He attempted a smile that turned into a grimace, though I wouldn't mind the doctor having a look. Without hesitation, she slipped under his arm, supporting his weight. Lean on me. Dr. Harrison's office is just down the street. They made slow progress through the celebrating crowd, who parted for them with murmurs of concern and admiration. By the time they reached the doctor's office, Zach's face was pale with pain, his shirt soaked with fresh blood. This is more than a graze, Dr. Harrison said grimly after examining the wound. The bullet's still in there. I need to get it out before infection sets in. Do what you need to, Doc, Zach said through gritted teeth. Prudence moved to leave, but Zach caught her hand. Stay, please. She couldn't refuse those blue eyes, clouded with pain but still determined. For the next hour she held his hand as doctor. Harrison extracted the bullet and stitched the wound, marveling at Zach's stoicism. He didn't cry out once, though his grip on her fingers tightened to the point of pain during the worst moments. "You're lucky," the doctor said as he finished bandaging Zach's torso. "Another inch to the left and we'd be having a very different conversation. No riding for at least 2 weeks, and someone needs to change these bandages daily." "I can do that," Prudence offered without thinking. Both men looked at her in surprise. "That's hardly appropriate for a schoolteacher," Dr. Harrison said gently. "I can send my nurse, I'll do it," Prudence insisted. "Mr. Zimmerman saved my life when I first arrived. The least I can do is help with his recovery." She raised her chin, daring either of them to argue. Zach's eyes never left her face, a warmth in them that had nothing to do with his fever. "Thank you," the doctor sighed. "Very well, but be prepared for talk, Miss Galloway. This town thrives on gossip." "Let them talk," she echoed Zach's words from weeks before. "I know what's right." The following morning, Prudence arrived at Zach's ranch just after sunrise, having borrowed Mrs. Wilson's buggy. The main house was larger than she expected, a sprawling 2-story structure with a wide porch and large windows. A Mexican woman answered her knock, introducing herself as Alina, the housekeeper. "The patron is still sleeping," she said, eyeing Prudence with frank curiosity. "The doctor gave him medicine for the pain." "I've come to change his bandages," Prudence explained, holding up the bag of supplies doctor Harrison had provided. Alina's eyebrows rose, but she stood aside. "He is upstairs, second door on the right. I will bring coffee." Zach's bedroom was spacious but simply furnished, with a large bed, a dresser, and a chair by the window that overlooked the ranch's rolling pastures. He was asleep, as Alina had said, his face younger and more vulnerable in repose. His bare chest rose and fell with steady breaths, the white bandage stark against his tanned skin. Prudence hesitated, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the situation. She was alone in a man's bedroom, about to touch his bare skin. Nothing in her proper Boston upbringing had prepared her for this. She cleared her throat. "Zach." His eyes opened immediately, alert despite the lingering effects of the medicine. When he saw her, a slow smile spread across his face. "Prudence, you came. I said I would." She moved to the bedside, setting down her bag. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been kicked by a mule, but better for seeing you." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I need to check your bandages." "Yes, madam." He attempted to sit up, wincing with the effort. "Let me help you." She slipped an arm behind his shoulders, acutely aware of his warm skin against her forearm as she helped him to a sitting position. Her fingers trembled slightly as she began to unwrap the bandages. "I'm sorry if this hurts." "I've had worse." The wound looked angry and red, but without the worrying signs of infection. Prudence cleaned it carefully, applied the salve Dr. Harrison had provided, and rewrapped it with fresh bandages, trying to maintain a professional demeanor despite her racing heart. "You're good at this," Zach observed. "Gentle hands. My father was often ill toward the end. I learned to care for him." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "Tell me about him." Prudence hesitated, then found herself wanting to share the truth with this man who had shared his own painful past with her. He was a professor at Harvard. Brilliant, respected, but he made a terrible mistake. He embezzled money from the university to cover gambling debts. When he was discovered, he took his own life rather than face the scandal. She swallowed hard. "I was teaching at a girls' school in Boston at the time. After the scandal broke, no respectable school would hire me. That's why I came west to outrun my father's shame. And here I thought you were just adventurous." Zach's voice was gentle, without judgment. "Desperate is more accurate. The position here was my last hope." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both trying to be judged for who we are, not where we came from." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition of kindred spirits. Alina's arrival with coffee broke the moment. She raised an eyebrow at their clasped hands but said nothing as she set the tray down. "I should go," Prudence said reluctantly. "School starts in an hour. Will you come back tomorrow?" There was vulnerability in the question, in the way his eyes followed her as she gathered her things. "Yes," she promised. "Tomorrow and every day until you're healed." True to her word, Prudence returned each morning to change Zach's bandages and each evening to check on his progress. They talked for hours during these visits about books they'd read, places they'd seen, dreams they still harbored. She learned that beneath his capable exterior was a thoughtful man who read Shakespeare and Whitman, who had traveled to San Francisco and Sacramento, but dreamed of seeing Europe someday. In turn, she shared her love of teaching, her childhood in Massachusetts, her hopes of making a real difference in her students' lives. With each visit, the connection between them deepened, transcending their different backgrounds and the town's expectations. By the second week, Zach was able to move around the house, and they took to sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over his land. It was during one such sunset that he finally spoke of his feelings. "I knew from the moment I saw you that you were different," he said quietly. "Not just beautiful though you are, but strong, unafraid." Prudence laughed softly. "I was terrified that day. I thought I was going to die before I even reached town. But you didn't cower. You held your ground." He turned to face her, his blue eyes intense. "I've been half in love with you since that moment and falling deeper every day since." Her heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Zach, I know it's not proper. I know what the town will say, but I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just friendship." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "If you don't feel the same, tell me now, and I'll never speak of it again." Instead of answering with words, Prudence leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. It was her first kiss, tentative and sweet, but it held the promise of everything she'd begun to feel for this remarkable man. When they parted, Zach's smile was radiant. "I'll take that as encouragement." "It is," she whispered. "But Zach, we have to be realistic. The school board would never approve of their teacher courting a man with your reputation. Then we'll be discreet until they get used to the idea, or until the school year ends and you're free to make your own choices." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I'm a patient man, Prudence. I've waited all my life for someone like you. I can wait a little longer to court you properly." But discretion proved impossible in a town the size of Calistoga. Within days of Prudence's first kiss with Zach, rumors were flying about the schoolteacher's frequent visits to the Zimmerman ranch. Mrs. Blackwell wasted no time in calling an emergency meeting of the school board. Prudence was summoned on a Friday afternoon after her students had been dismissed. The board members sat in the front row of desks, their expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. Only Dr. Harrison offered a supportive smile as she entered. "Miss Galloway," Richard Blackwell began formally, "it has come to our attention that you have been spending an inappropriate amount of time at the Zimmerman ranch, unchaperoned." Prudence stood tall, her hands clasped before her. "I have been changing Mr. Zimmerman's bandages and ensuring his wound is healing properly, as Dr. Harrison requested." "Twice daily visits seem excessive," Mrs. Blackwell remarked coldly. "And they continue despite Mr. Zimmerman's obvious recovery." "He was injured while protecting this town," Prudence replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I would think gratitude, not suspicion, would be the appropriate response." "We are grateful for his service," Richard Blackwell said, looking uncomfortable. But as our school teacher, you are held to a higher standard of behavior. The children look to you as an example of propriety and moral virtue. And you believe I've fallen short of that standard by showing compassion to an injured man. By showing more than compassion, if the rumors are to be believed, Mrs. Blackwell cut in. You were seen embracing on his porch, in full view of his ranch hands. Heat rushed to Prudence's face, but she refused to be shamed. Mr. Zimmerman and I have developed feelings for one another. We have done nothing improper or dishonorable. A murmur ran through the board members. Miss Galloway, Richard Blackwell said more gently, we value your teaching abilities. The children have made remarkable progress under your guidance. But this attachment to Zimmerman places us in a difficult position. Many parents have expressed concern. Because of his mother, Prudence asked directly, or because he had the audacity to rise above the circumstances of his birth and build something for himself? Dr. Harrison coughed to hide a smile while several board members shifted uncomfortably. His background is complicated, Richard Blackwell admitted. There are also those rumors about how he acquired his initial capital, unproven rumors, Dr. Harrison interjected, which we should not be repeating as fact. The point remains, Mrs. Blackwell said firmly, that a relationship between our school teacher and Zachary Zimmerman is inappropriate and reflects poorly on this institution. Then I suppose you leave me no choice, Prudence said quietly. If I must choose between my position and my heart, I choose my heart. Shocked silence fell over the room. You would resign? Richard Blackwell asked incredulously. Over a man you've known for less than 3 months. Over the right to make my own choices about whom I love, Prudence corrected. Over the principle that a person should be judged by their character, not their parentage or past mistakes. Over the belief that this town is better than its prejudices. She took a deep breath. But I would prefer not to resign. I love teaching. I love my students, and I believe I've proven my worth as an educator. Dr. Harrison stood. Miss Galloway is right. We hired her for her teaching abilities, not to dictate her personal life. As long as she conducts herself with dignity in the classroom, what she does with her private hours is her own business. That's a dangerously modern view, Doctor, Mrs. Blackwell said coldly. It's a humane one, he countered. And I, for one, will not be party to running off the best teacher this town has ever seen because she had the courage to follow her heart. A tense discussion followed, with opinions divided among the board members. In the end, they agreed to take no action for the time being, provided Prudence maintained appropriate behavior during school hours. As she left the meeting, her emotions a tumultuous mix of relief and indignation, she found Zach waiting outside, leaning against a hitching post with his arms crossed. "You heard?" she asked. "Enough." His expression was grim. "I never meant to cause trouble for you. You didn't." Their small-mindedness did. She glanced back at the schoolhouse. "They've decided not to dismiss me for now at least. That's something." He straightened, wincing slightly at the pull on his healing wound. "Prudence, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." His blue eyes were serious. "Are you sure I'm worth this fight? The gossip won't stop. It might even get worse. They'll always see you as the school teacher who fell for the son of a—" "Stop." She placed her fingers against his lips. "I know exactly who you are, Zachary Zimmerman. A man who built a life from nothing, who defends this town even when it scorns him, who reads poetry and treats everyone from the banker to the stable boy with equal respect." Her voice softened. "A man I'm falling in love with." Zach's eyes widened, then crinkled at the corners as a smile spread across his face. He took her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. "Then we'll face them together." "Together," she agreed. That weekend, Zach invited Prudence to ride out to the far pastures of his ranch, where a small lake nestled among the hills. It was a perfect autumn day, clear and crisp, with just enough warmth from the sun to make the outdoor excursion pleasant. They spread a blanket beside the water and shared the picnic lunch Alina had packed for them, talking and laughing with the ease of old friends. When they had finished eating, Zach grew quiet, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out over the rippling water. "What are you thinking about?" Prudence asked. "The future." He turned to her, taking her hand in his. "When I bought this land, I had a vision of what it could become. A place where I could build something lasting, something that would outlive me and the whispers about where I came from. I've accomplished part of that dream. The ranch is thriving, respected for the quality of its stock and crops." He paused, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "But sitting here with you, I realized the other part was missing, someone to share it with. Someone who sees me for who I am, not who my mother was or what this town thinks I should be." Prudence's heart raced as he continued. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few months, but some things you just know, deep in your soul." He shifted to face her fully. "Prudence Galloway, I love you. I want to build a life with you, a family. Would you consider becoming my wife?" Joy bubbled up within her, so intense it was almost painful. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Zach, yes." He gathered her into his arms, his kiss deep and passionate, filled with promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. "They'll talk, you know. The town will be scandalized. Let them talk." She smiled against his lips. "I don't care what anyone thinks but you." "There's something else," Zach said, his expression growing serious again. "Something I need to tell you before you fully commit to this." Prudence tensed. "What is it?" "It's about how I got the money to buy this ranch." He took a deep breath. "The rumors. They're not entirely wrong. I did come into money suddenly, around the time of that stagecoach robbery near Sacramento." She waited, her heart hammering. "I was working as a scout for the stage company then. I knew the routes, the schedules. I was riding back from a scouting trip when I came across the aftermath of the robbery. The bandits were gone, but they'd left one man for dead, the Wells Fargo agent. He was barely alive, gut shot and fading fast. There was a strong box beside him, broken open but not empty. He told me there was $10,000 still inside, payment for a lumber contract. He asked me to get it back to Wells Fargo." Zach's eyes held hers steadily. "I could have taken that money and disappeared. No one would have known, but I didn't. I got that man to a doctor in the next town, though he died anyway, and I returned every dollar to the company." "Then how did you get the money for the ranch?" "The company rewarded me with $2,000, a fortune for a ranch hand. It was enough for a down payment on this place when old Jenkins wanted to sell. I worked day and night to make the rest of the payments, took every odd job I could find between ranch work. It nearly killed me, but I did it honestly." His expression was a mix of pride and defiance. "That's the truth. Not as exciting as the town's version, but it's who I am." Prudence felt tears sting her eyes. "Thank you for telling me. You deserve to know. No secrets between us, ever." She leaned forward and kissed him softly. "No secrets. And I've never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of marrying you. Zachary Zimmerman." They rode back to the ranch hand in hand, planning their future together as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Neither noticed the rider watching them from the distant ridge, or the malevolent gaze that followed their progress back toward town. The news of their engagement spread through Calistoga like wildfire. Reactions were mixed, genuine congratulations from some, barely concealed disapproval from others. Mrs. Wilson surprised Prudence by being among the former. "I've watched that boy struggle for acceptance for 10 years," the landlady said, patting Prudence's hand. "He deserves happiness, and so do you, my dear." Even some of Prudence's students seemed delighted by the news, especially Billy Thompson, who had developed a hero worship for Zach after the gunfight with Thorpe's gang. "Mr. Zimmerman showed me how to rope a calf last summer," the boy told her excitedly during recess. "He said I was a natural. When you're married, can I come visit your ranch sometimes?" "Of course you can," Prudence assured him, touched by the child's enthusiasm. Not everyone was so supportive. Mrs. Blackwell made a point of removing her daughter from school, announcing loudly that she would be sending Emily to a boarding school in Sacramento, where proper moral standards are maintained. 2 other families followed suit, though the majority of parents kept their children in Prudence's classroom. The school board called another meeting, but found themselves facing unexpected opposition from Dr. Harrison and, surprisingly, Richard Blackwell himself, who seemed to have softened his position. "The children are learning," Richard argued. "Their test scores are the highest they've ever been. And frankly, Zimmerman employs half the men in this town. I'm not inclined to alienate him over who he chooses to marry." The practical consideration of Zach's economic influence seemed to sway the holdouts, and the board reluctantly agreed to honor Prudence's contract through the end of the school year. What would happen after that remained an open question. Zach and Prudence decided to marry in December, before the worst of winter weather set in. They planned a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Dr. Harrison performing the service. Despite the controversy surrounding their relationship, they sent invitations to the entire town, determined to begin their marriage with an open hand of friendship rather than resentment. As the wedding date approached, Prudence divided her time between teaching and preparing for her new life as Mrs. Zimmerman. Alina taught her to cook the Mexican dishes Zach favored, while he built additional bookshelves in the ranch house study to accommodate her extensive collection. "I've always wanted a library," he confessed as they arranged her books alongside his. "My mother taught me to read from discarded newspapers and dime novels. She said education was the one thing no one could take from me." "She was a wise woman," Prudence said softly. "I wish I could have known her. She would have loved you." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her head. Strong, smart, seeing the best in people despite their flaws. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the arrival of one of the ranch hands, his expression urgent. "Boss, we got trouble. Cattle missing from the north pasture. Looks like rustlers." Zach's posture changed instantly, alert and focused. "How many head?" 20, maybe more. Trail leads toward the pass. Get the men together. I'll meet you at the stables in 5 minutes. As the ranch hand hurried off, Zach turned to Prudence. "I'm sorry, I have to go," she nodded, a knot of worry forming in her stomach. "Be careful, rustlers are desperate men." "I will." He kissed her quickly. "Don't wait up, this might take all night." But morning came with no sign of Zach or his men. Prudence taught her classes with distracted concern, rushing back to the ranch as soon as school was dismissed. Alina met her at the door, her face drawn with worry. "No word," the housekeeper said. "Pedro rode out at dawn to look for them but hasn't returned either." Prudence paced the porch until twilight, then made a decision. She saddled Zach's gentlest mare and, ignoring Alina's protests, rode toward the north pasture. She knew these lands from their rides together. Zach had shown her every hill and valley of his property with pride. The night was clear but moonless, the stars providing just enough light to follow the main trail. As she approached the edge of Zach's land, she heard the distant sound of gunfire. Her blood turned to ice. Prudence urged the mare forward, following the echoes until she reached a rocky outcropping overlooking a small valley. Below, she could make out the flashes of gunfire and the dark shapes of men taking cover behind boulders. One group was pinned down near a stand of trees. Zach's men, she guessed, while the others fired from positions along the ridgeline. She was trying to determine what to do when a hand clamped over her mouth. She struggled wildly until a familiar voice whispered in her ear. "Prudence, it's me, Pedro. Be still." The ranch hand released her, his expression a mixture of relief and exasperation in the starlight. "What are you doing here, Miss Galloway? It's not safe." "I was worried," she whispered back. "What's happening?" "Where's Zach?" "Ambush," Pedro said grimly. "We tracked the rustlers here, but they were waiting for us. It's not just about the cattle. They knew the boss would come himself." "Thorpe's men?" "Yes, the ones that escaped the posse. They want revenge." He peered over the ridge. "The boss is down there with the others. They're pinned down, low on ammunition. I was trying to circle around behind the rustlers when I saw you." Fear clutched at Prudence's heart. "We have to help them." Pedro nodded. "I was thinking the same, but you should go back to the ranch, get more men. There's no time," Prudence interrupted. "How many rustlers?" "5, maybe 6. "And our men?" "4, including the boss," Prudence thought quickly. "Do you have a plan?" Pedro looked at her with newfound respect. "I do now. Listen carefully." 20 minutes later, Prudence stood trembling beside her mare at the far edge of the valley, a rifle in her hands. She had fired guns before her father had taught her during summer visits to his brother's farm in Vermont, but never at a person. Yet the thought of Zach trapped and in danger steeled her resolve. She fired 3 shots into the air, just as Pedro had instructed. Almost immediately, she heard answering shots from the other side of the valley, where Pedro had positioned himself. Their ploy worked. The rustlers, believing themselves caught between 2 groups of reinforcements, turned their attention away from Zach's position. Taking advantage of the distraction, Zach and his men opened fire from below. In the confusion, 2 of the rustlers broke cover, trying to reach their horses. One fell to Zach's shot, while the other made it to his mount and galloped directly toward Prudence's position. She raised the rifle, her hands shaking. The rider spotted her and raised his own gun. Prudence fired without thinking, the recoil jolting through her shoulder. The rider slumped forward, then toppled from his horse, which continued past her into the darkness. The remaining rustlers surrendered soon after, realizing they were outmaneuvered. As Zach and his men secured the prisoners, Pedro found Prudence still standing where he had left her, the rifle hanging limply from her hands. "You did good, Miss Galloway," he said gently, taking the weapon from her. "The boss is fine thanks to you." She nodded mutely, the reality of what she had done, shooting a man, perhaps killing him, washing over her in waves of shock. Pedro led her down to where Zach was binding a rustler's hands. When Zach saw her, his face went through a rapid succession of emotions: relief, joy, anger, concern. He handed the prisoner off to one of his men and strode toward her. "Prudence, what in God's name are you doing here?" "Helping," she managed, her voice small, his anger dissolved at her expression. He gathered her into his arms, holding her tightly. "You could have been killed. So could you?" She buried her face against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent of leather and gunpowder. "Is he dead? The man I shot, wounded, not killed. He'll live to stand trial." Zach pulled back to look into her face, his eyes soft with wonder. "You saved us. Pedro told me your plan." "It was brilliant. Dangerous as hell, but brilliant. I couldn't lose you." The words were simple but encompassed everything she felt. Zach pressed his forehead to hers. "And I can't lose you. Promise me you'll never do anything so reckless again." She couldn't make that promise, not when it came to his safety, and they both knew it. Instead, she kissed him, there under the stars with the sounds of the captured rustlers and the victorious ranch hands as their backdrop. "Let's go home," Zach said when they broke apart. "We have a wedding to prepare for." News of the gunfight and Prudence's role in it spread through Calistoga with the speed only small-town gossip can achieve. To her surprise, the story seemed to shift public opinion in their favor. The school teacher who had risked her life to save her fiancé and his men from murderous rustlers became something of a local legend overnight. "Folks respect courage," Mrs. Wilson explained when Prudence expressed her confusion over the changed attitudes. "And loyalty. You showed both, even Mrs. Blackwell seemed to soften her stance, approaching Prudence after church the Sunday before the wedding. "I may have been hasty in my judgment," the banker's wife admitted stiffly. "Mr. Zimmerman has proven himself a valuable member of our community, and your devotion to him is commendable." Coming from Mrs. Blackwell, it was practically a blessing. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the December sun casting long shadows across the frost-covered ground. Prudence dressed in her room at the boarding house, helped by Mrs. Wilson and several of her female students who had begged to be part of the occasion. Her wedding dress was simple but elegant ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, ordered from San Francisco at Zach's insistence. "Nothing but the best for my bride," he had declared, overriding her protests about the expense. A knock at the door revealed Billy Thompson, fidgeting nervously in his Sunday best. "Mr. Zimmerman sent me with this," the boy said, holding out a small package wrapped in silver paper. Inside, Prudence found a delicate pearl necklace with a note in Zach's bold handwriting. "For new beginnings, all my love, Z." Tears pricked her eyes as Mrs. Wilson fastened the pearls around her neck. "There," the older woman said, stepping back to admire the effect. "Perfect." A buggy decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons arrived to transport Prudence to the ranch, driven by Dr. Harrison himself. "You look radiant," he told her as he helped her into the seat. "Zimmerman's a lucky man." "I'm the lucky one," Prudence replied, her happiness too great to contain. The ranch house had been transformed for the occasion. Alina and the ranch hands had decorated the main room with pine branches, candles, and ribbons. A simple arch of evergreen stood before the fireplace, where Dr. Harrison would perform the ceremony. To Prudence's astonishment, nearly everyone from town had accepted their invitation, filling the room with a buzz of anticipation. As the traditional wedding march began, played on a borrowed piano by one of her older students, Prudence entered on Dr. Harrison's arm. Zach waited for her beneath the arch, looking impossibly handsome in a new black suit, his blue eyes shining with love and pride, when Dr. Harrison asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" The older man replied, "She gives herself, with the blessing of all who love her." It was exactly what Prudence had requested, a statement of her independence even as she chose to join her life with Zach's. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When it came time for their vows, Zach took her hands in his voice clear and steady. "Prudence, when I first saw you, I thought you were the bravest woman I'd ever met. I've since learned you're also the kindest, the smartest, and the most stubborn." A ripple of laughter went through the guests. "You saw past where I came from to who I am, and in doing so, you taught me to see myself through your eyes. I promise to spend every day of our life together trying to be the man you believe me to be. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, and to love you with everything I am for as long as I live." Tears blurred Prudence's vision as she spoke her own vows. "Zach, you once told me that people in this town would mock you for loving me, and you said to let them see what love looks like. Today, They're seeing it not just in these words or this ceremony, but in how we've faced every challenge together, stronger as a pair than either of us alone. I promise to be your partner in all things, to face whatever comes with the same courage you've shown me, and to love you completely and without reservation for all of our days. They exchanged simple gold bands, and when Dr. Harrison pronounced them husband and wife, Zach swept her into his arms for a kiss that drew cheers and a few good-natured whistles from the crowd. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with dancing, feasting, and more goodwill than Prudence had dared to hope for. Even Richard and Josephine Blackwell stayed for several hours, the banker raising a toast to two people who remind us that courage and character matter more than circumstance or convention. As the last guests departed and the ranch hands discreetly made themselves scarce, Zach led Prudence to the porch, where they could see the stars spreading across the winter sky. "Happy, Mrs. Zimmerman?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind, completely. She leaned back against his chest, savoring the solid warmth of him. "Do you think the town has finally accepted us?" "I think they've accepted that we don't care whether they accept us or not," he chuckled. "Though shooting a rustler to save your man does tend to win people over in these parts." "I'd do it again," she said seriously. "I know you would." He turned her in his arms to face him. "That's why I love you, but I'd rather not put you in that position again." "No more midnight rescues," she agreed, "at least until next time you need one." He laughed, the sound rich and warm in the cold night air. "Come inside, wife. I believe we have some private celebrating to do." The first year of their marriage passed in a whirlwind of work and happiness. Prudence continued teaching through the spring, then surprised both herself and the school board by accepting their offer to return in the fall. Zach supported her decision completely, proud of her dedication to her students. "This town needs you," he said simply, "and I need you to be fulfilled." Together, they established a rhythm to their days. Mornings were spent on their separate duties, Prudence at the schoolhouse, Zach managing the ranch. Evenings were for each other, sharing the day's events over dinner, reading aloud from favorite books, or simply sitting on the porch watching the sun set over their land. They began to make improvements to the ranch house, adding a proper library with floor-to-ceiling shelves and comfortable chairs where they could read together. Prudence started a small garden, learning from Alina which plants would thrive in the California soil. By their first anniversary, there was another change to celebrate. Prudence was expecting their first child. "A baby," Zach whispered in wonder, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though the joy in his eyes was answer enough. "More than I ever thought possible." He kissed her tenderly. "You've given me everything I never dared to dream of having." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Prudence continued teaching until early spring, when the school board insisted she take leave for the final months before the birth. The town's attitude toward the Zimmermans had changed remarkably over the past year. Where once there had been whispers and judgment, now there was genuine acceptance and even admiration. Zach's business continued to thrive, and he used his influence to improve the town, funding a new wing for the small hospital and contributing to the construction of a proper school building to replace the one-room structure where Prudence taught. "You're becoming quite the civic leader," she teased him one evening as they reviewed plans for the school. "Just trying to give back a little of what I've been given," he replied. "This town took a chance on a nobody kid with nothing to his name. I haven't forgotten that." In early June, as the California summer began to assert itself, their son was born after a long but uncomplicated labor. James Harrison Zimmerman, named for Prudence's father and the doctor who had stood by them from the beginning, had his father's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair that promised to be as unruly as Zach's. "He's perfect," Zach murmured, cradling the infant with careful hands, just like his mother. Fatherhood suited Zach beautifully. He doted on his son, spending hours simply watching the baby sleep or carrying him around the ranch to show him the ropes. Prudence often found them together in the early morning, Zach with the baby against his chest, telling him stories about the land and animals. "He won't remember any of this," she said once, watching from the doorway. "Doesn't matter," Zach replied, looking up with a smile. "I will. And someday, I'll tell him how, from his very first days, he was a part of this place. Just like you." By the time James was 6 months old, Prudence was ready to return to teaching. The new schoolhouse was completed, a handsome building with large windows and separate classrooms for different age groups. The school board had hired an assistant teacher to help with the increased enrollment, but they had kept the position of headmistress open for Prudence. "You built this school for me, didn't you?" she asked Zach on the day of the dedication ceremony. He shrugged, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Maybe I just wanted to make sure our son has the best education possible." "Our son is currently more interested in putting his toes in his mouth than in reading," she laughed, bouncing James on her hip. "He'll grow into it," Zach assured her. "With a mother like you, how could he not love learning?" The dedication ceremony brought the entire town together. Richard Blackwell, as mayor, a position he had won in the last election, partly due to Zach's support, gave a speech praising the community's commitment to education. To Prudence's surprise, he singled her out for special acknowledgement. "When Miss Galloway, forgive me, Mrs. Zimmerman first came to Calistoga, some of us weren't sure what to make of this proper Eastern lady with her Harvard education and progressive ideas." A chuckle ran through the crowd. "But she has proven herself to be exactly what our children needed. A teacher who believes in their potential, who challenges them to think beyond the boundaries of our small town, and who demonstrates through her own life the value of courage and integrity." Zach squeezed her hand as Blackwell continued. "This new school is more than just a building. It's a statement about who we are as a community and what we value. It stands as a testament to the vision of Zachary Zimmerman, who not only funded much of the construction but insisted on the highest quality materials and design." Blackwell turned to face Zach directly. "You've shown us what it means to invest in the future, not just of your own family, but of all the children of Calistoga. For that, we are deeply grateful." As applause filled the air, Prudence looked up at her husband, seeing in his face the boy he must have been the son of a prostitute, sleeping in a livery stable, dreaming of a day when he would be respected for who he was, not judged for where he came from. "They see you now," she whispered, loud enough only for him to hear. "They finally see you." His eyes, when they met hers, were suspiciously bright. "They see us," he corrected softly, "just as we are." After the ceremony, as they walked home with James sleeping against Zach's shoulder, Prudence reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first chaotic day when gunfire had welcomed her to Calistoga, through all the challenges and triumphs of the past 2 years, one constant remained: the love that had grown between them, defying convention and expectation. "What are you thinking about?" Zach asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About what you said that day when I was afraid of what people would think of us being together. Let them see what love looks like. I think they've seen it, Zach, and it changed them." He smiled, shifting James gently in his arms. "It changed us first." As they approached their home, the ranch house glowing golden in the late afternoon sun, Prudence felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she belonged beside this remarkable man, raising their son, building a life rich with purpose and love. "Do you ever wonder," she asked as they climbed the porch steps, "what would have happened if you hadn't been there that day when the stagecoach was attacked? If someone else had rescued me?" Zach considered the question seriously. "I believe we would have found each other anyway," he finally said. "Some things are meant to be, Prudence. You and me, this life we've made, it was written in the stars long before we met." "I think so too," she agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "And I'm grateful every day that those stars led me to you." Together, they entered their home, a family forged through courage, understanding, and a love that had transformed not only their own lives but the heart of an entire town. What had begun with gunfire and danger had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting, proof that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most perfect endings. 10 years later, the Zimmerman Ranch had grown to become one of the most prosperous properties in Napa County. The main house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. James had been joined by 2 sisters, Elizabeth and Sarah, and a younger brother, Thomas. The library Prudence and Zach had created was now the heart of their home, filled with books from floor to ceiling and comfortable chairs where the family gathered each evening. Prudence continued to serve as headmistress of the Calistoga school, which had grown to accommodate over 100 students. Her innovative teaching methods had gained recognition throughout California, and educators from as far away as San Francisco came to observe her classrooms. Zach had expanded his business interests beyond ranching, investing in the railroad and in Calistoga's growing reputation as a spa destination. The natural hot springs that gave the town its name had become increasingly popular with visitors from the cities, and Zach had partnered with several other business owners to build proper bathing facilities and a small hotel. Despite their success, they remained grounded in the values that had brought them together: honesty, courage, and a belief in second chances. Their home was always open to those in need, and more than one troubled young person found refuge at the Zimmerman Ranch, just as Zach once had found acceptance in Calistoga. On their 10th anniversary, they hosted a celebration that brought together the entire town. Under a canopy of lanterns strung across the ranch yard, with tables laden with food and a small orchestra playing cheerful tunes, they renewed the vows they had made to each other a decade earlier. James, now a serious 9-year-old with his father's blue eyes and his mother's thoughtful nature, stood proudly beside them, holding the rings. Elizabeth and Sarah, 7 and 5, scattered flower petals with more enthusiasm than precision, while 3-year-old Thomas watched wide-eyed from his grandmother Wilson's lap. As the music played and their friends and neighbors celebrated around them, Zach led Prudence away from the crowd to a quiet corner of the garden she had lovingly cultivated over the years. "Happy?" he asked, just as he had on their wedding night. "Completely," she answered, leaning into his embrace. "You've given me everything I could have dreamed of and so much I never dared to imagine." "We gave it to each other," he corrected, his arms tightening around her. "Every day I wake up amazed that you chose me." As if there was ever any other choice. She turned in his arms to face him, her hands framing his beloved face. There were a few strands of silver now at his temples and lines of laughter around his eyes, but he was still her handsome cowboy, the man who had defied a town's prejudice to love her. "Do you remember what you said when I was afraid they would mock you for loving me?" she asked softly. "Let them see what love looks like," he quoted, his voice low and intimate in the gathering twilight. "They've seen it," she whispered. "In everything we've built together, in our children, in the way this town has changed. They've seen what real love can do." Zach nodded, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the lanterns. And they learned, just as we did, that love isn't about where you come from or what others think. It's about who you choose to become together. In the distance, their children's laughter mingled with the music and the sounds of celebration. The sun was setting over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. And in that perfect moment, surrounded by the life they had created through courage and faith in each other, Prudence and Zach sealed their renewed vows with a kiss that held all the passion of their first and all the depth of a decade shared. Their love story, once whispered about in scandal, had become a legend in Calistoga, a testament to the power of seeing beyond appearances and circumstances to the truth of a person's character. And in a town that had once been defined by rigid social boundaries, the Zimmermans had helped create a community where what mattered most was not where you came from, but who you chose to be. As they walked hand in hand back to their celebration, Prudence knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them as they had faced everything else together, with open hearts and the unshakable belief that love, true love, could transform everything it touched.